Welcome to my channel. Wipe the lipstick off the pig. I am Yo, and I am a super empath. I'm sharing my story in a series format. This is part one, and I'm sharing my most vivid empathic experiences from my childhood throughout my early 20s. I implore you to share your experiences in the comments below and or email the channel at wipethelipstickoffthepig@gmail.com, as I'm aware this topic has been taboo for many. But I'm hoping you interact by leaving a comment, liking, sharing, and most importantly, subscribing to help the channel grow. As this channel grows, so will my interactions with you. Please note, I may create future videos addressing feedback received. Of course, I will be discreet and provide anonymity where requested. Your participation, though, is paramount. So let's get it. My first memory, I was 2, and I recall watching the movie Jaws with my family. Now, I'm sure my parents thought I was way too young to remember it and I'd be okay. A few nights later, though, just before bed, I was standing up in my crib, fighting sleep as a typical 2-year-old would. My brother, who was 5 at the time, happened to walk in my room. So I smiled at him, thinking he was visiting me to play. But my smile turned into terror as I watched him throw his toy rubber shark in the crib with me. My 2-year-old mind thought that rubber shark was real. I thought that rubber shark was going to eat me alive. And I just witnessed that stuff in Jaws. I was hysterical. I went ballistic. I screeched, not screamed. I thought my short-lived life was over. I had full terror within me. However, that wasn't the only strong emotion I felt that night. Because at the same time, I felt an overwhelming sense of joy and accomplishment. I felt giddy and mischievous. And once my mom came running into my room, I felt a heart racing terror that was distinctly different from my own. It was a triple rush of very different emotions at the same time. In retrospect, that was my first empathic experience. I felt my terror, my mom's terror, and my older brother's mischievous joy. My second experience, just 1 year later, involved my first best friend ever. Her nickname was Ducky. Ducky and I had many play dates. See, her family and my family were amongst the few minorities that lived in that neighborhood. So our families were very close. And one Saturday night, I was permitted to stay up late night with my parents as we were watching TV. Our sofa faced the TV, and the back of it was in the direction of our front door and a decent ways away from it. We were suddenly startled by banging on our door. At such a late time at night, it had to be 10 p.m. or so. Yo, it was crazy because I remember this just like it was yesterday. My pop sprung up and said, "Who the fuck banging on my motherfucking door this late at night?" He belted out, "Who is it?" As he opened the door, I was 3. I stood up on the couch, leaning against the sofa, curious to see who was banging on at the door. When my pop opened the door, it was Ducky's dad, but not with that smile on his face that I've grown accustomed to. He was disheveled. He was crying a snot-nosed cry, blubbering, which to this very day, I can't say I witnessed a similar event. However, he was uncontrollably crying, and in that instant, I felt something that I could never verbalize or express at the tender age of 3. I was I was white haired, scared of him. I wanted him out of our house. I then witnessed my pop hug him. I was so afraid for my dad. Then my mom went to hug him, and I was horrified that this man's going to do something awful to my mom. I felt he was a bad man, a monster. So needless to say, when all was said and done and he was out of our house and the door was securely locked again, I felt right as rain. It wasn't until 40 years later, when I was writing in my journal, this memory, it crept back up in my head. So I called my mom And I asked if she recalled that night. She let me know she did. I asked her, did he embody them, Mom? She said yes. He burned his house down with Ducky and her mama inside. I lost my breath for a moment. I said, how did you find out that he committed that crime? She didn't answer. She read about it in the newspaper. Wow, that explains why I never saw Ducky again. Hmm. My third experience. It happened that same year while I was still 3. My mom, she was cleaning in another room, vacuuming to be exact. I was in another room, sitting on the floor near an uncovered electrical socket. I looked over and saw a shiny metal butter knife laying in the plush carpet. So I thought it would be a wonderful idea for me to take that butter knife and stick it into one of those holes in the electrical socket. Yes, fam, I did exactly that. Miraculously, I'm here to tell this story. But anyway, my grip on the knife was abruptly released, not by my own doing. The knife, it was stuck in the socket, but it flew out of the socket forcefully. A huge face with electrical blue outline slowly emerged from the wall and gravitated towards mine. And like I said, real slow. I quickly scooted back as I was in the seated position, so I kicked my feet to gain traction to be back as far up as possible. I then got up and ran to my bedroom. I was clearly shaking. I knew I'd never do anything like that again. Now, what amazes me to this day is I was wondering how I was dumb enough to put the butter knife in the socket, but I was smart enough not to tell my mom because I know she would have, yeah, she would have handled that. But anyway, I digress. So, I feel that the indoctrination of children in the preschool and daycare is the first step of societal programming. You see, the goal is to have children deny their connection with the spirit realm, get them to believe in make believe, and then burst their bubble, convincing them it's not real, immediately telling them that ghosts, spirits aren't real, they're imaginary friends, and etc. See, luckily for me, my parents sent me to church from an early age, and I never was convinced to disbelieve in what I couldn't see, such as Father Yah, the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh, the source, the universe. However, by the time I was 11 years old, with my empathic abilities, I couldn't differentiate the feelings of others against my own, and nor did I possess the awareness to. An example, when I was 11, I saved up my money gained from chores and gifts. I was super excited. I wanted to purchase my first record single like many of my friends were doing. At that time, we were able to buy a single song, and I ran to the record store and I bought it. I brought it home. I played it over and over again as loud as my record player allowed. I mean, I was singing both parts with all my heart. It was a duet. The song was On My Own by Patti LaBelle and Michael McDonald. Now, fam, I know that song's not necessarily a song made for an 11-year-old girl, and it's not customary for a girl of my age to typically rush out and buy and have such a fulfilling satisfaction that I had when I sung it. But looking back, I had to be picking up on my parents' energy as they were growing apart and they were going through a rough patch in their marriage at that time. And they were not confiding in me on how they were feeling, so I know I had to pick up on it through my empathic abilities. And as a grown woman now, and looking back at my not recent, my conversations with them, you know, they let me know at that time that that song was a great depiction, an accurate depiction of how they felt towards one another at that time. So all through my teens, I was dealing with my feelings and everyone else's, not being able to differentiate anything. This made my teens a living hell. Throughout my childhood, well into my teens, I had a difficult time because of all the, life. from the economic issues to being subjected to school to, just television, America. You already know. I don't got to go into all that. But anyway, so during that time, I attended many different denominational churches, as I've always been a spiritual being despite the societal influences. My mom was very supportive and she didn't frown upon me researching different religions and cultures and or searching for a place to fellowship. Needless to say, I never settled into joining a church, however. I attended many different services for many different denominations. I went to synagogues and kingdom halls, churches. I'd essentially take what resonated with me and I left what didn't. It wasn't until my late teens and early 20s when I started reconnecting with my empathic ability and beginning to understand that certain feelings were not mine again. In my conversations with my mom, I would often say, something told me not to take that route, or something warned me not to go there that night, and good thing I stayed home. My mom said it was my first mind. She said I should always listen to my first mind. I took heed of it because it was very useful in my day. You know, it was very useful in my day to day navigations from my teens to my 20s. Even now, it's relevant. But, of course, society still had its way of tainting my perception through science fiction. I mean, I'm partial to science fiction movies. As I look back on movies, and especially the sci fi movies even made today, there's some truth in those movies. Perhaps I will expound on that in the near future. My 20s were very eventful, for lack of a better word. I want to share with you when I was 23. At this time, I had two sons, one 4 and the other just months old. I was a single parent, working 12-hour days and attending 3-hour lectures at a college a few nights a week. Well, one night after getting my little guys to sleep, I was so tired. I was so tired that I literally was afraid to go to sleep because I felt there was a chance I might never wake up. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever felt so exhausted that you're afraid to go to sleep, but that was my state at the time. I was laying down, fighting sleep, but knew it was inevitable. I was in that in between state where I was not wide awake, but I didn't quite drift off to sleep yet. All of a sudden, I felt an innocent presence in the room with me, and I heard a faint voice of a little girl. She spoke to me softly, acknowledging her awareness of my exhaustion. She softly spoke and said, I know you're tired, and you do not have to keep on like this. She kept on reaffirming me my exhaustion was real, and then stated, I haven't had much time to live. I wouldn't mind trading places with you. Then you could rest. And then she asked for my permission. I was still laying down with my eyes closed, and in response, I had anger, but I didn't respond back to her with it. I responded with conviction. No, I have a whole life to live. I want to meet my children's grandchildren. Well, that innocence I was feeling turned into feelings one feels when their regular dreams turn into nightmares. But mind you, I wasn't asleep. I felt a demonic presence in the room, and I immediately sat up and looked all around because I felt it in the room with me, but I didn't see it. That was the first time I personally experienced the opposition's presence in this 3D reality. In retrospect, I now know that this was the beginning of the spiritual journey, where I'd be subjected to spiritual attacks and spiritual training. The latter, I came to find out 2 decades later. Thank you for listening. I will continue this. I have so many stories to tell, and they're not necessarily stories. It's more like testimony, but for entertainment purposes. Wink, wink. I have so many spiritual stories to go. So please join me on my journey. Feel free to interact, comment, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you again.